The starbun sliced through the endless expanse of stars, its sleek form a blur against the vastness of space. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the helm, staring through the viewport as the distant beauty of Kepler 442b unfolded before him. A planet like no other, lush forests, glittering rivers, and sprawling mountains that seemed to reach for the sky. On paper, it was the perfect opportunity for a diplomatic mission, a chance to build bridges between Earth and the Zelani, a peaceful and intelligent species who had requested aid after a mysterious predator attacked their world. But as Jake leaned forward, gripping the console, he felt the weight of the unknown bearing down on him. The Zelani were not just asking for help, they were pleading for it. The predator was something new, something humanity had never encountered before. A creature so deadly, so elusive, that the Zelani had failed to defend themselves despite their advanced technology. Jake's reputation had preceded him. Known across the galaxy as one of the best tacticians, a deathworlder who had survived planets where life barely clung to existence, he had been sent to negotiate. But something about this mission felt different. The universe was full of strange, deadly life forms, and Jake had faced them all. But an unknown predator, a creature that stalked its prey with an intelligence beyond their understanding, that was new. As the ship entered the atmosphere of Kepler 442b, the crew could feel the turbulence. The hull groaned under the strain, and the sensors buzzed with feedback. "Steady," Jake murmured to himself, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Captain Morrison," a voice crackled through the comm system. It was Vera, the Zelani envoy. "We welcome you to our world, but please understand there are dangers here that you may not be prepared for. The Predator. It is unlike anything you've encountered. It has adapted in ways we don't fully understand." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Don't worry, Vera, we've dealt with worse. We'll find a way to help." The starbun touched down with a soft shudder. The landing was smooth, but the air outside was thick with humidity. The ship's doors hissed open, and Jake led his crew out onto the soft, damp earth of. The planet's beauty was undeniable. The ground was covered in thick grass, dotted with tall trees whose leaves glistened in the pale sunlight. But there was something else, something lurking just beneath the surface. Jake could feel it, a sense of unease that pressed against his chest. "Welcome to Kepler 442b, Vera greeted them. His silver skin shimmered in the light as he stepped forward, his eyes wide with concern. "The world is beautiful, yes, but it hides many dangers. The predator is fast, intelligent, and it can hunt in ways we cannot predict. It waits, watches, and attacks when you least expect it." Jake nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll handle it. Show us where you need help, Vera." As they made their way deeper into the forest, the silence became oppressive. The only sound was the rustling of the leaves above them. But then, a scream echoed through the air, sharp, frantic, full of terror. Jake's heart skipped a beat. A soldier from his crew, young and nervous, broke through the trees, his eyes wide with fear. It's coming," he shouted, his breath ragged, voice trembling with panic. Jake didn't hesitate. "Fall back to the ship," he ordered, but before they could react, the ground seemed to shift. The trees around them began to rustle violently, the air itself rippling with a low hum, as if something massive was moving just beyond their sight. The young soldier stumbled into a small clearing, falling to his knees. His face was pale, his eyes locked on something in the distance. It's here," he whispered. Before Jake could approach, the trees parted and the predator emerged. It was massive, an enormous creature, covered in scales that shimmered like liquid night. Its 6 muscular legs ended in claws that dug into the earth with terrifying ease. The body was long and sinewy, a mix of sleek predator-like features and thick armored hide. Its eyes, glowing a pale yellow, focused on the soldier. The beast let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Jake's neck stand up. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Jake knew it was already too late for that. The creature was upon them. With a motion faster than anything Jake had ever seen, the predator lunged. The soldier didn't even have time to scream before the creature struck, its talons sinking into his flesh with sickening ease. "Open fire," Jake shouted, but it was like trying to stop a storm with a handkerchief. Pulse blasts filled the air, but the creature was already gone, moving with terrifying speed, vanishing into the thick forest with its kill in tow. Jake's mind raced. "It's not just hunting, it's toying with us," he muttered, a cold realization dawning on him. "It's learning how we react." The crew was silent, stunned by the brutal efficiency of the predator. Vera stepped forward, his voice trembling. We can't stop it. We've tried everything. We've used our weapons, our technology. Nothing works. Jake turned to his crew, his face hardening. Then we'll do what humans do best, adapt. This thing's not invincible. We just need to outthink it. But as he spoke, the sounds of the forest seemed to close in on them. It wasn't just the predator they had to worry about. It was the unknown. The beast had seen something in him, something that went beyond physical strength, something that resonated deeper than the fear that gripped every other cadet. In that moment, Jackson Cole knew the truth. It wasn't the strength of a warrior that mattered. It was the endurance of a survivor, and survival was something he had mastered long ago. The air was thick with tension as Jake and his crew retreated into the ship. The Predator's attack had left them shaken, but there was no time for fear. The Zelani, already on edge, watched with wide eyes as Jake took charge. "Everyone back to the ship now?" Jake barked, his voice steady despite the chaos. His team moved quickly, retreating to the safety of the starbound, but the Predator was still out there, lurking in the shadows. Inside, the crew gathered in the briefing room. The doors hissed shut behind them, sealing out the forest's ominous whispers. Jake stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed as he surveyed the faces of his team. His mind raced. How did they stop a creature like that? They had weapons, sure, but they weren't enough. "We need more data," Jake said, his voice low but determined. "We don't know anything about this predator other than that it's fast, it learns quickly, and it hunts based on fear. We need to understand its behavior, how it tracks us, and what makes it tick." One of his soldiers, Lieutenant Mills, spoke up. "We don't even know where to start. The creature moves so fast and the way it picks us off. It's like it knows exactly how we'll react." Jake nodded grimly. "Exactly, it's studying us, but we have one advantage." He paused, letting his words sink in. "It's not invincible. We've faced worse on Earth. We can outsmart it." The Zelani leader, Vera, stepped forward, his face drawn with fear. "Captain, you don't understand. This thing is not like any predator we've encountered. It does not follow patterns. It adapts, it mimics. We have only survived by hiding, by staying silent. But your people, you are not like us. You fight back, you think. This predator does not fight fairly. It exploits weaknesses. You cannot face it head-on." Jake's gaze hardened. "I don't plan to fight it head-on. We're going to learn everything we can. We'll use the ship's scanners, the environment. We'll bait it, track it, and outsmart it." "How?" Vera asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "By making it think it's the hunter," Jake replied. "And then, when it least expects it, we turn the tables." The plan was simple in theory. Gather as much data as possible using the ship's sensors and the surrounding environment. The predator relied on fear, using it as a weapon, and Jake knew that they had to exploit that. But first, they needed to understand its behavior and weaknesses. Jake and his team spent the next few hours setting up a perimeter around the ship. They used motion sensors, heat detectors, and traps designed to study the predator's movements. Every few minutes, the ship's AI, a cold, calculating voice that rarely made suggestions, would chime in with a report. "Sensor 1, movement detected 30 meters to the east. Sensor 2, no visual confirmation, disturbance in the foliage." Jake frowned. "It's out there watching. We need to get closer." Mills looked at him with concern. "And what if it's just waiting for us to make a move? We don't know what it can do." "We're going to provoke it," Jake said, his voice steady. "Not directly, but we'll make it come to us. We'll learn its behavior. Every predator has a pattern. It's just a matter of finding it." The team moved silently through the forest, using the dense foliage as cover. The trees were tall, their bark glistening with moisture. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the low hum of the forest filled their ears. But even in this strange alien world, something felt familiar. The jungle was alive with the pulse of nature, but Jake felt a presence stalking him, a shadow in the periphery of his vision. As they advanced, Jake's mind raced. The predator was fast, yes, but it was also methodical. It didn't just attack, it waited. It observed. If they could get it to react, they could predict its next move. If they could make it feel like it was winning, they might be able to control the situation. "Stay low," Jake whispered. "Don't make a sound, we need it to come to us." The team moved like shadows, their movements deliberate, quiet. They reached a clearing, a small ravine that ran through the forest, its waters trickling quietly below them. Jake signaled for them to stop. His hand hovered over the comms, sending a message to the ship. "AI, activate bait protocol." Moments later, a flare shot into the sky, lighting up the dark forest like a beacon. The predator would see it, and it would think its prey had made a mistake. The team crouched low, watching the flare's fatting glow. They could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the snap of branches, and then silence. "Is it coming?" Mills asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake held up his hand. "Wait." The forest seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with anticipation. Then, just as the silence became unbearable, the ground beneath them shuddered. The predator was moving. A blur of motion flashed through the trees, a streak of black, a creature so fast that it was almost impossible to track. Jake's heart skipped a beat. It was coming. "Now," he shouted, pulling his weapon and turning to face the creature head-on. His pulse rifle hummed with energy as he aimed it into the trees. The predator was close, too close. But just as it leaped, a sound erupted behind it. A different noise. The predator paused, its head snapping toward the source of the new sound. The team moved in, weapons ready, as Jake's mind worked fast. "This is it," Jake said, his eyes narrowing. "It's confused." The predator hesitated, its movements stuttering as it tried to calculate its next move. And for the first time since landing on Kepler 442b, Jake saw it: fear. The predator hesitated for a split second, its 6 muscular legs digging into the ground as its glowing yellow eyes scanned the surrounding forest. It was confused, its mind racing to process the new stimuli, something unfamiliar. For just a moment, the creature seemed uncertain. This was the opening they had been waiting for. "Move," Jake commanded, his voice sharp as he sprinted toward the nearest tree for cover, gesturing for the team to follow. "Keep it distracted." The moment they broke cover, the predator lunged again, but this time its approach was less fluid. It was cautious. The unexpected sound had disrupted its usual hunting rhythm, forcing it to recalibrate. Jake saw it, a fleeting hesitation that confirmed his theory. The predator was intelligent but not infallible. "Get to the high ground," Jake shouted to his team. "We have the advantage now." Mills and the rest of the team climbed up a series of thick roots protruding from a massive tree, gaining some elevation. Jake quickly followed, keeping his eyes fixed on the predator as it prowled the clearing below them, its massive frame casting an ominous shadow in the moonlight. From the higher vantage point, Jake could see the predator more clearly. It was larger than he'd imagined, its sleek black body rippling with muscle, and its eyes, those unsettling eyes, were locked on them. The creature was relentless, and it had them in its sights. Jake's heart raced. "It's waiting," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "But it's confused, it doesn't know what to expect from us." They had expected the predator to follow simple patterns: chase, pounce, retreat, and repeat. But this creature was different. It was learning, adapting, evolving in real time. They couldn't predict its behavior because it had no consistent behavior to track. Mills crouched beside him, her weapon ready. "What now, sir?" "We keep the pressure on it," Jake replied. "It's learning, but it's not perfect. We've got to disrupt that learning process, make it second-guess every move it makes." Jake knew the next step was crucial. They had to confuse the predator further, make it question its tactics, and in doing so, expose a flaw they could exploit. But how? "Wait," Mills said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "It's not just reacting to us, it's reacting to the environment." Jake turned his head toward her, understanding dawning. "You're right. The forest itself is part of the puzzle. The predator isn't just hunting us, it's reading the forest too. The smells, the sounds, everything." The forest itself was alive with motion, vines twisting, leaves rustling, and creatures scurrying beneath the underbrush. It was a world of constant flux, and the predator had learned to use that to its advantage. But now it was being overwhelmed. The team had to make it feel like it was losing control. "We need to create chaos," Jake said, formulating a plan on the fly. "Something that forces the predator to act on instinct, not logic." Mills hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We've got a few explosives in the ship's cargo bay. We can use them to stir up the forest, make it feel like the environment is against it." "Good idea," Jake said, "but we'll need a distraction first, something big enough to get its attention." The team moved quickly to execute the plan. Mills and another soldier, Harris, set off toward the ship to retrieve the explosives while Jake and the others continued to observe the predator. Time was running out. The creature was starting to move again, circling the area with deadly precision, its predatory instincts back in full control. It had figured out that the high ground didn't give it the advantage it needed. It would find another way. As the team set up their trap, Jake's mind raced. They were on borrowed time. The longer the predator took to adapt, the more dangerous it would become. He needed to outsmart it, but every move they made was met with the predator's evolution. It was the perfect hunter except for one thing. It wasn't just hunting them. It was hunting a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds. Earthlings. Jake stood still, watching the predator's movements as it prowled below them. He had no illusions about what would happen if they failed. The creature wasn't just a threat. It was a symbol of everything that the Zelani feared. The unknown, the unpredictable, the force that could change everything in the blink of an eye. But Jake had learned that fear was just another tool. And humans, they were experts at using it. The trap was nearly set. The explosives were planted around the perimeter of the clearing, ready to detonate at a moment's notice. The predator had moved farther into the trees now, its glowing eyes just visible through the thick foliage. It was waiting for them to make a mistake. Jake stepped forward, raising his voice so that his team could hear him through the comms. "Get ready. Once those explosives go off, we need to move fast. We're going to force it into the open, take control of this fight. Understand?" "Understood," came the replies. Jake's eyes never left the predator. It was watching them, patient and silent. For all its intelligence, it still couldn't comprehend the unpredictability of the human spirit. It had learned to read every living thing in this forest, but it had never encountered Earth's wild card, humans. "Now," Jake shouted. The first explosion rang out, shaking the trees and sending birds into the air with a panicked flurry of wings. The predator's head snapped toward the sound, its muscles coiling as it prepared to pounce. The second explosion came moments later, a deafening roar that shook the ground. The predator was no longer cautious. It had been cornered. It charged toward the nearest explosion, its speed almost too fast to track. But that's exactly what they wanted. Jake signaled, "Move." The team surged forward, weapons raised. They were no longer just trying to escape, they were going to fight. But as Jake and his crew moved toward the predator, something unexpected happened. The predator stopped. It froze, its body tense, its eyes narrowing as it scanned the area. Jake's heart skipped a beat. What the hell? The creature turned, its gaze locking onto Jake as if it had just realized something. It was no longer confused. It was studying them in return. The forest was still. The predator was waiting for them to make the first move. This was the moment, Jake realized. They were no longer the prey. They had become the predators. The forest held its breath as Jake and the team squared off against the predator. The air was thick with the sound of the creature's heavy breathing, its glowing eyes fixed on Jake like a predator assessing its prey. The battle had shifted. The predator had stopped hunting them and had begun to study them instead. It was learning, adapting, just as Jake had predicted. Jake's mind raced. This was no longer about brute force, it was a battle of wits. The predator was an apex creature with hunting tactics that evolved in real time. It could track their scent, read their movements, and adapt to their strategies, but they had something it didn't. They had unpredictability, and they had each other. "Stay tight, stay unpredictable," Jake muttered to his team over the comms. "This thing adapts to patterns. If we stick to a routine, it'll figure us out. We need to be chaotic." They spread out slightly, moving in irregular patterns through the dense undergrowth, making sure not to give the creature any easy targets. The predator's eyes followed them with unnatural precision, but it still hesitated, unsure. It had encountered prey that scattered, but this was different. It had learned that humans didn't just run, they fought back, thought through their next move. Jake glanced over at Mills, who was crouched behind a thick tree trunk, her rifle ready but her expression tense. She nodded at him, indicating that they were all set. "On my mark," Jake said softly, his voice steady. "We confuse it, get it out in the open, and then—" Before he could finish his thought, the predator moved. With a terrifying burst of speed, the creature lunged, its massive frame tearing through the foliage like a storm. Its claws swiped the air, slashing at nothing but the empty space Jake had occupied seconds before. It was fast, faster than he'd ever expected. But this time it was sloppy. The predator's quick action had caught the team off guard, but they didn't falter. Jake leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the creature's talons. He fired his pulse rifle, but the blast missed, striking a tree instead. Mills was right behind him. She fired, her shot hitting the predator's shoulder, sending it reeling back with a snarl of pain. The creature's eyes flared, its muscles tensing as it prepared for its next attack. "We've got its attention," Jake shouted. "Keep it moving." The predator, enraged by the hits it had taken, charged again, its claws ripping through the air with deadly force. It was fast, relentless, but it was losing its precision. It wasn't thinking anymore, it was reacting. And that gave Jake the opening he needed. "Set the trap," Jake ordered. At his signal, the ground beneath the predator shifted. Harris, who had been in position nearby, triggered a series of mechanical detonators buried in the forest floor. The ground trembled as the trap snapped into action. Thick vines shot up from the soil, entangling the predator's legs, slowing it down. For a moment, the creature struggled, its eyes darting around in confusion. It hadn't expected the forest itself to turn against it. Jake didn't hesitate. He aimed his pulse rifle at the creature's exposed side. "Now!" he shouted. Mills and the other soldiers opened fire, their weapons blasting in unison. The combined firepower struck the predator's thick hide, sending shockwaves of pain through its body. The creature let out a deafening roar, thrashing violently as the vines continued to restrain it. But just as victory seemed within reach, something unexpected happened. The vines that had ensnared the predator began to snap. One by one, they tore apart, unraveling as if the creature was simply too strong for them to hold. The predator let out a guttural snarl, its claws shredding the remaining vines as it broke free. Jake's heart skipped a beat. The creature wasn't just strong, it was adaptable in ways they hadn't accounted for. It was learning again, recalibrating its approach in real time. "Get back," Jake shouted as the predator charged. Its eyes locked onto him with a ferocity that made his skin crawl. The team scattered in all directions, but the predator was already on them. It moved too fast, too unpredictably. Jake didn't have time to think, he just reacted. "Flank it," Jake yelled, as he sprinted toward the predator's side. Mills and Harris took the cue, each positioning themselves on opposite flanks of the predator. They fired in quick succession, trying to get it off balance. But the predator was too quick, evading most of their shots with unnatural precision. Jake gritted his teeth as he reached the creature, his pulse rifle aimed directly at its head. The predator snapped toward him, its jaws snapping shut just inches from his face. He ducked, rolling to the side to avoid its teeth, his rifle still aimed at the creature's exposed underbelly. Now or never, Jake thought. "Now," he yelled to the team. In perfect synchronization, the team fired simultaneously. A barrage of shots hit the predator all at once, striking it in the weak points, its underbelly, the soft tissue beneath its armored hide. The creature screeched in pain, its body convulsing with the force of the impacts. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The predator's massive frame slumped to the ground, its glowing eyes flickering as it let out a final, tortured cry. It was over. Jake took a step back, breathing heavily as the adrenaline slowly ebbed away. His body was still tense, ready for any sudden movements, but the predator was down, dead. But even as he exhaled, a feeling of unease washed over him. He knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. A creature like that didn't just appear out of nowhere. And somewhere out there in the vast expanse of Kepler 442b, there were more predators, more dangers waiting to be uncovered. Is it dead?" Mills asked, her voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. Jake didn't answer immediately. He stood there watching the creature's still form, its once glowing eyes now dim. Finally, he spoke. "For now," he said, his voice cold. "But we need to get back to the ship. We have a lot to learn." The predator lay motionless, its immense body sprawled across the forest floor, its once glowing eyes now dim and lifeless. The team stood in silence, their chests heaving with adrenaline. Jake's pulse still thudded in his ears, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They had won this round at least. But the sense of unease gnawed at him, deep in his gut. He knew this wasn't the end. "Is it really over?" Mills asked, her voice shaky but laced with disbelief. Her rifle was still trained on the creature, as if waiting for it to lunge back to life. Jake didn't reply immediately. He took a deep breath, glancing around the clearing. The forest was eerily quiet now, the sounds of life seeming to retreat into the shadows. Whatever had just happened, the trap, the ambush, the battle, it had shifted something in the environment. The predator was down, but its presence still loomed over them. "It's over for now," Jake said quietly, his voice tinged with caution. But I don't think we've seen the last of these things. Vera, who had been standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the entire confrontation unfold, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, his eyes flickering between the fallen predator and Jake. This is a victory, but not one without consequence. We do not know where this creature came from or how many others exist. Jake turned to him, his face hardening. And we need to figure that out. This thing didn't just appear on its own. There's a reason it's here. Something's triggering this, something bigger than just an isolated predator. Vera nodded gravely. We have fought these creatures for months. They come in waves, but there is something strange about them. They are evolving too quickly, adapting in ways no creature should. It is as though they are being guided, directed toward us. Jake's brow furrowed. Directed by who? Vera hesitated, his gaze darting to the fallen creature. We do not know, but the attacks have been increasing in frequency. The creatures are not random. It feels as though they are searching for something. Searching for something? Jake echoed, a sense of dread creeping into his chest. What are they after? Vera didn't answer, his silence heavy with the weight of a truth he wasn't yet ready to share. Jake knew he had to push. If there was something more going on here, something beneath the surface, they needed to uncover it before it was too late. Tell me, Jake insisted, his voice firm. What are they looking for? Before Vera could respond, a sudden harsh signal broke through the comms. The ship's AI, ever calm, ever dispassionate, chimed in with an urgent warning. Warning, multiple readings detected. Unidentified biological signatures detected within a 5-kilometer radius. Predatory activity escalating. Immediate action required. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He whipped his head around to look at the jungle surrounding them. The predator they had just killed might have been only the first wave. Get back to the ship, Jake yelled, turning to his crew. Now move. The team scattered, sprinting through the thick underbrush. Jake's mind raced as his legs pumped, carrying him toward the starbound. His instincts told him the worst wasn't over, not by a long shot. The predator was dead, yes, but something else was out there, something far worse. Mills ran alongside him, her breathing heavy as she glanced over her shoulder. Jake, what the hell is going on? These creatures are evolving too fast. We can't keep up. I know, Jake panted, and I think I know why. The trees parted as they reached the clearing near the ship. The Zelani were already there, their figures silhouetted against the dimming light. Jake didn't slow his pace, his eyes scanning the horizon. We need to get airborne, Jake barked to the crew as he reached the ship's ramp. Prepare the engines now. But before anyone could respond, the ground shook beneath their feet. A low, ominous growl echoed from the depths of the forest, followed by another, then another. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. The creatures were coming, more than one, more than they had expected. Jake didn't need to look to know they were outnumbered. Fire up the engines, Jake ordered, his voice tight. Get us airborne now. But as the crew scrambled to activate the ship's systems, another growl rumbled through the forest, closer this time. The air was thick with tension, and Jake could feel his pulse quicken. Something in his gut told him they were not going to make it out this time without a fight. The ramp closed with a harsh hiss as the starbound's engines roared to life. The ship lurched forward, but just as it began to rise, the trees exploded outward. Dozens of them. The creatures. They emerged from the underbrush in droves, swarming toward the ship with terrifying speed. Their glowing eyes burned with hunger, their claws ripping through the air as they raced toward their prey. The forest seemed to be alive with their movement, an entire pack, far larger than the first predator they had encountered. The ship shook violently as the first wave of predators collided with the hull, their claws scraping against the metal with a screech. The ship's shields flared to life, but the force of the impact rattled everyone inside. Brace for impact, Jake shouted as the ship lurched again, struggling to ascend. We can't get out, Mills screamed. They're too close. Then we fight, Jake barked. He slammed his hand on the console, activating the ship's defensive systems. Weapons systems came online, the hum of energy charging through the ship's array. Jake turned to the crew. We're not letting them win, get to the turrets. The team scrambled to their stations, weapons in hand. Outside, the creatures swarmed the hull, their claws scraping across the reinforced surface. They were relentless, their attacks synchronized as though they knew exactly where to hit. Jake gritted his teeth. They were learning. The predators weren't just attacking randomly, they were coordinating. They had developed tactics. "We're going to need more than just guns to survive this," Jake muttered to himself, his mind working frantically. "We need to know where they're coming from. We need to know who's controlling them." "Jake," Mills called out from the weapons console. "They're not just attacking, they're trying to get inside. The hull's not going to hold forever." Jake's heart sank. "Then we have to make it hold. We need to get answers before they tear us apart." His eyes burned with resolve. "We're going to find out what's behind this, one way or another, and we'll stop it." The predators were not just an obstacle, they were part of something much larger. And Jake Morrison wasn't going to let them destroy everything he and his crew had fought for. Not now, not ever. The Starbund lurched violently as the predators clawed at its hull, the noise of their strikes echoing through the ship. Every scrape, every strike rattled the walls and floors, each impact a reminder of how close they were to being overwhelmed. Outside, the dark jungle of Kepler 440 2b seemed alive, its shadows teeming with creatures that would stop at nothing to destroy them. Jake Morrison stood at the bridge, his gaze fixed on the control panel as alarms blared and the ship shook under the relentless assault. The shields were holding, for now, but Jake knew it was only a matter of time before the predators found a weakness. "Shields at 60%, shouted Lieutenant Mills, her voice strained as she worked the controls. "Hull integrity is starting to fail. We need to get out of here or we're going to be sitting ducks." Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. He knew they had to get airborne, but the predators were too many and too smart. And now they were coordinating. That wasn't something Jake had accounted for. "Get us up, Mills," Jake ordered. "We have to get above the canopy, give the ship some space." Mills nodded and hit a series of buttons. The Starbund groaned as the engines roared to life, the ship lifting slowly from the forest floor. Outside the viewport, the predators swarmed the landing pad, clawing at the hull, trying to reach the crew inside. "Come on," Jake muttered under his breath, sweat beading on his forehead. The ship struggled against the predators' force, but as it ascended, the creatures began to slow their attacks, realizing they couldn't reach their prey. Yet they didn't retreat. Instead, they spread out below them, watching. The Starbund breached the thick canopy of trees and shot into the open sky, the stars outside a sharp contrast to the dark chaos below. For a moment, there was silence. But Jake didn't feel relieved. His eyes scanned the monitors in front of him, seeing the predators below spread out in the forest. There were more of them, a lot more. "We're not out of the woods yet," Jake muttered, his voice low but determined. "Where are they coming from?" "Captain," Vera's voice interrupted his thoughts. The Zelani leader had entered the bridge, his silver skin shimmering slightly under the artificial light. His expression was grim. "The predators are not random. They are not just creatures attacking to feed. They are being driven." Jake's eyes locked onto Vera. Driven by who? Vera stepped closer, his face etched with concern. "I believe we have been mistaken about the nature of these creatures. They are not native to our planet. They are engineered. Someone is breeding them, controlling them." "Who?" Jake demanded, his frustration growing. "Who is behind this?" "I do not know," Vera admitted, his voice tinged with fear. "But I believe these creatures are a weapon. They are designed to destroy, to clear the way for something or someone. I've seen patterns in their attacks, in their behavior. This is not random. This is a strategy." Jake's mind clicked into overdrive. A weapon, created, controlled, and directed toward the Zelani. This wasn't just a wildlife problem. This was something far more sinister, something far beyond an isolated predator. And if the Zelani were right, it meant whoever was behind this was planning something far more dangerous than just attacking a single species. "How long have these attacks been going on?" Jake asked, his eyes narrowing. "For several months," Vera answered. "At first it was sporadic, one or two creatures attacking at a time, testing our defenses. But now it has escalated, entire packs, groups. It's as though they're being unleashed to break us down piece by piece." Jake's eyes flashed with realization. This isn't just about the Zelani. This is a full-scale operation, an invasion. But why? What are they trying to clear? Vera shook his head, his face drawn in worry. "I cannot say for certain, but we have reason to believe that these creatures are being deployed to soften the ground for something much larger." Jake stood up, a determined look on his face. "Then we need to find out who's behind this. We need to cut the head off the snake before it spreads further." Mills looked over at Jake. And how do you suggest we do that, Captain? We've been barely holding off one of these things. There are dozens out there, maybe more. And the last thing we need is to make ourselves a target for whoever's controlling them. Jake's jaw clenched. We fight back. We take the fight to whoever's controlling these things. We make sure they know humans don't get pushed around. He turned back to Vera. What can you tell us about your planet's history? Have you had any dealings with outside factions, enemies, or any groups who might want to destroy you? Vera's expression darkened, and Jake could see the weight of the question hit him hard. There are rumors, whispers, but no one has concrete evidence. We have always been peaceful, neutral in galactic affairs. We have not made enemies, at least not openly. Which means someone trying to make you an enemy, Jake concluded. We need to track these creatures back to their origin. We need to find where they're being bred, and we need to find out who's doing it. Vera hesitated before answering. There is a place, a research facility. It's located deep in the northern hemisphere near the ice wastes. We used to run tests there, but we shut it down years ago. If the creatures are coming from somewhere, that is where I would begin to look. Jake turned to Mills and Harris. Prepare a landing strategy. We're going to the ice wastes. Get us there as quickly as possible. Mills nodded, her expression grim. Aye, Captain, but we need to be careful. If this research facility is still operational, it could be a trap. Whoever's behind these creatures is smart. They won't let us in without a fight. Jake met her gaze, his expression hardening. Then we'll give them a fight they'll never forget. As the Starbound descended toward the cold, desolate landscape of the ice wastes, the weight of their mission pressed heavily on Jake's shoulders. They were about to enter the heart of enemy territory, a place that had been forgotten by most of the galaxy, but one that could hold the key to stopping the creatures, and whoever was controlling them. He turned to his team, who had gathered around him in the briefing room. This is it. Whatever. Waiting for us down there, we can't afford to fail. We're not just fighting for the Zelani now. We're fighting for every living being who might be next on their list. Mills, Harris, and the rest of the crew nodded, their faces steely with resolve. They were in this together. And for the first time since the mission had begun, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The cold of the ice wastes hit them the moment the Starbound touched down, a brutal gust of wind whipping across the barren landscape, carrying with it the taste of ice and the promise of danger. Outside, the horizon stretched endlessly, an unbroken expanse of snow and rock, the ground hard and unforgiving. The research facility they had come to find lay somewhere beneath the icy surface, a relic of a time long past, and possibly the key to ending the nightmare the Zelani faced. Jake took a deep breath, the cold biting at his skin as he stepped onto the ramp of the Starbound. His breath misted in the air as he surveyed the bleak terrain, the ship's engines humming softly behind him. The predators they had encountered earlier seemed almost tame in comparison to what lay ahead. This place gives me the creeps, Harris muttered, his voice muffled by the cold as he looked out across the wasteland. Feels like we're walking into the belly of the beast. Jake turned to face him, his eyes narrowing against the wind. That's because we are, he said grimly. Stay sharp. We don't know what we'll find down there, but I'm sure it won't be friendly. Mills, standing next to Jake, checked the thermal readings on her device. There's a heat signature nearby. Looks like some kind of underground facility, possibly buried beneath the ice. We'll need to find a way to dig it out. Vera, who had insisted on accompanying them despite Jake's concerns, stepped forward, his silvery skin gleaming in the stark light. This place, it was once a scientific hub. We used to test new technologies and weapons here, but we closed it down years ago, after everything. After what? Jake asked, raising an eyebrow. Vera hesitated before answering, his voice heavy with guilt. After we discovered that some of the experiments we had conducted might have been dangerous, we thought we had shut it all down, but now, I wonder if we were too naive. Jake's brow furrowed. Dangerous? What kind of experiments? We tested genetic enhancements, trying to create more resilient life forms, organisms that could survive in harsh environments like this one. Vera's voice trailed off as he looked out toward the horizon, as if searching for something in the distance. But we never intended for it to go this far. We never intended for them to become what they are now. Jake felt a pang of realization. The predators were the result of genetic manipulation. The creatures they had fought earlier, those terrifying, evolved beasts, were not born of nature. They had been engineered. We need to get inside, Jake said, his voice low but firm. We need to shut this down before it gets worse. They trekked across the snow, the cold gnawing at their bones as they moved toward the facility's coordinates. The landscape was empty, devoid of life, the only sound their boots crunching against the icy surface. As they approached a large, jagged cliff, the entrance to the underground facility appeared, a series of thick metal doors half buried in the snow and ice. "We're here," Mills said, her voice taut with anticipation. "Let's see what's behind door number 1. Jake nodded, stepping forward. The doors were locked, but the ship's AI had been working on a way to bypass the security systems. Within seconds, a hiss of steam filled the air as the massive metal doors groaned open, revealing the darkened corridors of the facility beyond. "Stay close," Jake ordered as they entered. The air inside was frigid, the low hum of old machinery still echoing through the walls. It was as though the place had been abandoned for years, yet something still lingered, something malevolent. The group moved deeper into the facility, their footsteps muted by the thick walls of concrete and metal. The atmosphere was oppressive, the shadows stretching long across the halls. The only light came from the faint glow of emergency lights, their flickering casting strange shadows on the walls. "This is unsettling," Harris murmured, his voice tense. "Feels like we're walking through a tomb." Jake didn't respond. His instincts told him they were being watched. The silence felt too complete, too suffocating. As they reached a large room at the end of the corridor, they stopped in their tracks. The chamber was enormous, filled with strange machines, rows of empty containment tanks, and dozens of frozen, unmarked vials, some shattered, some untouched. The room smelled of chemicals and decay. "This is it," Vera said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. "This is where they were created, the experiments. They started here." Jake's eyes scanned the room. In the center, a massive control panel flickered to life as the ship's AI activated it remotely. A series of holographic images began to project from the console, blueprints, diagrams, and notes outlining the genetic experiments. As the images shifted, a chilling discovery appeared on the screen. It wasn't just a single predator they had been facing. There were many, different breeds, different genetic modifications, each more dangerous than the last, each designed for a specific purpose. But there was one thing that stood out above all else. The creatures had been intentionally engineered to be more than just predators. They had been made to be a weapon, one that could be controlled, adapted, and used to wipe out entire populations. And someone was still pulling the strings. A voice crackled through the comms, harsh and distorted, sending a chill down Jake's spine. "You found us." Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he turned toward the speakers, his pulse rifle already in hand. The voice was cold, calculating, familiar in a way he couldn't place. "Who are you?" Jake demanded. "What have you done?" A figure appeared on the holographic screen, a humanoid figure wearing a dark cloak, its features hidden in shadow. "I am the one who created them," the voice said, echoing through the cold, sterile room. "I am the one who controls them, and now you will understand that nothing you do can stop what is coming. The Predator's hunt has only just begun." The figure disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only a flickering, distorted image on the screen. The words echoed in the silence, chilling and final. "Looks like we have a new enemy," Jake muttered, his mind racing. "And this war, it's just getting started." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered, and a series of loud bangs echoed from the far side of the facility. "Get ready," Jake shouted. "They're not done with us yet." As the first of the engineered creatures appeared in the doorway, their glowing eyes fixated on the team, Jake's resolve hardened. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. And Jake Morrison wasn't going to let anyone or anything destroy it.